Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in about 1 minute. Just give people a couple of minutes to finish getting on. Okay, before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items for you today. We do have a hashtag for the webinar. It's 5S Team. So feel free to post insights using this hashtag on LinkedIn or Instagram about what you've enjoyed or learned today during the webinar. Feel free to ask questions via the chat or the Q&A capability anytime during the presentation. We're going to hold the questions for David for the end, but we will attempt to answer all questions. And if your question is not answered during our time today, someone will follow up with you after the webinar. This session is being recorded and will be sent to you following the presentation for your own purposes or to share with others. All right, now let's get started with our webinar about building 5S teams. I'd like to introduce our speaker. David Visco is a 5S expert. Beginning in 1985, David launched his career as a warehouse control manager, running a distribution center that managed inventory of over $500 million in value. As he furthered his career, he gained extensive experience across warehouse, production planning, logistics, and materials management. Using 5S in the workplace, he saw a unique opportunity and a need for a 5S resource. So in 2006, he founded the 5S store. It was the first online store dedicated entirely to 5S. The 5S store provides a massive range of 5S products, free best practices content, and coaching services to thousands of clients. In 2015, his first book, 5S Made Easy, was published. Today, in addition to his role at the 5S store, he frequently speaks publicly on the topics of 5S best practices. All right, take it away, David.
Hey, thank you, Rena. And thanks everybody for coming today. Before we get started, I know things are not normal in today's world, right? Not business as usual by a long stretch. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and I hope that this will, kind of break you away from some of the craziness that's going on. We heard from quite a lot of you because we were thinking maybe we postpone or delay, but people came in and they said, no, we want the webinar. So we decided to hold it. So hopefully this will be useful for you today. All right, let's get going. Okay, so first of all, I've made a few assumptions today regarding the fact that you're on this webinar. So this webinar is going to assume that you know what 5S is and what it's all about. It's also going to assume that you have management support. So they may not be heavily involved in your daily 5S initiatives, but that you actually have their support to continue to implement 5S. Right? That's really important. So, what does a 5S team do? It's a question I get asked often, so we figured we'd address that today. And I'll go through at least 6 things that I think that they would do. First of all, a 5S team is going to help drive and support the 5S implementation, right? That would be the group that your folks that are involved in 5S will go to and seek answers from. They'll be teaching, so they'll educate and coach employees. So a lot of your employees you're going to find, they're very interested in 5S, but they need somewhere to go, somebody to talk to. And that 5S team would be that group. They'll also help set the bar. So they're going to help set the 5S standards throughout the company. The idea here is that they're coaching along the way. It isn't that they're saying this is the way it has to be done as far as setting standards. What they do is kind of coach along the way. And as the teams and the people are providing input, the 5S team itself is going to help guide those standards. They'll also help with checks and balances. In other words, they'll be managing, maintaining, or coaching through the 5S audits that you should be doing on a regular basis. 5S audits can be a tricky thing, as we know. We could have a whole webinar, and in fact, we will at some point on just 5S audits. So having that 5S team for folks to go to help guide them through 5S audits and some of the challenges that surface is really helpful. They'll also help define what 5S materials you might use throughout the plant or the facility. So there's a lot of 5S materials and solutions out there, and the 5S team should be counted on to help the company and the folks implementing 5S throughout exactly, what tape to use, what red tags to use, what posters might we hang throughout the facility, or document holders, that type of thing. And the 5S team should help support the facility for that and make sure that all the materials over time are standardized. And certainly they'll help amplify the communication of 5S throughout the facility. Make sure that everybody is on the same page and that everybody understands what 5S is all about and how the program is going to grow throughout the facility and people get trained over time. So the 5S team really, they encompass the entire 5S initiative, and they should be the go-to for anybody in the plant to be able to get answers on. All right, so what are 5S functions for success? What are the key 5S functions? There could be a lot of different people involved in that team. I have my own suggestions here on who I think should be part of that team. We're going to start with designating a 5S champion or a 5S leader. You can call them what you want, but that person should be overseeing the entire initiative. They should be the go-to person when there are some questions or whatnot that people just aren't really sure of. You need to have that person, somebody in charge. I think it's a great idea to have somebody from a safety team on your 5S team. Now, if you happen to have 6S in your facility, whereby they've added S as the sixth S, safety as the sixth S, then you've already got a safety person involved in that. But if you don't have 6S in your facility, you definitely want to have somebody from the safety team involved in everything that you do as far as 5S goes. Something I don't see often is having somebody from the facilities group on the team. I think that's incredibly useful to have somebody from facilities in the group. I'll give you an example. One place we're at several years ago, folks wanted to hang a lot of signs from the ceilings. However, they didn't include anybody from facilities on the team or the initiative. So the group got together to do a blitz in an area one day, and they wanted to hang all these signs, and they had the daisy chain and they had the signs all ready to go, but they had no way of hanging them. If they'd had somebody from facilities on the team handy, they would have got a scissor left if need be, or found some other means ahead of time to set up to actually hang those signs. Keep in mind, the facilities group also takes a ton of ownership in that building, right? They really keep things moving and operating properly. And since they take that level of ownership in the building, anything that you do to that building, they take very personally. And it's good. You want them to, because they care. So a lot of times in an area, you might be doing painting walls, replacing light bulbs, that type of thing. And they're going to want to be involved in doing that. So having facilities on the team is huge. It can be really helpful. And then you get down to the folks. So who's going to be involved, like on the production floor? Well, you certainly want the department manager to be involved, because they're the person who needs to hold the rest of the group accountable, right? They need to make sure that the whole team realizes how important 5S is to the department and the company and themselves. And they have to keep everybody moving forward with 5S. Additionally, you want a group lead in the department to be there. That group lead person, I suggest, is probably the most important person on the whole team. They're the individual that is closest to the production workers, if you will. So, more than likely, they may have even been a production worker at one point, and they may know the folks in that area extremely well, and people respect them, right? Because they moved up and whatnot. But that person, they're on the front lines day in, day out, while a department manager might be off, stuck in some meetings or what have you. But the group lead is seeing what's going on all day long, right? So if that group lead is in place and they're responsible for 5S and they're held accountable for 5S, that group lead is going to see the entire team and how they're doing with 5S. So you get your production workers on the floor, and theoretically they're reporting to this group lead, who then reports to the department manager. That group lead can make sure that everybody is following all the standards that everyone put in place for 5S. It's really, really key that that group lead knows that they're going to be held accountable for it. And truth be told, that's why I think having human resources, which I mentioned below, should be involved on the team as well. And I know I have frontline workers there. Of course, they're going to be involved. They're the folks that are doing it day in, day out, right? They're building the widgets. If you don't have their buy-in, then all bets are off anyway. So they, of course, need to be on the team. But somebody from HR can be incredibly helpful on this team, because 5S at its core is about behavior changes. And people don't always know how to deal with that. Like the group lead, for example, that person may have a lot of friends that are now reporting to them, right? And meanwhile, the group lead's being told that they have to hold people accountable. Well, how do you do that when you have a relationship with those folks? It's not always easy. So that group lead needs some training and coaching on how to deal with those situations. And that's why I think the human resources is a valuable part of that 5S team. Somebody from HR should definitely be there. I don't see that too often. And when I've told some people about that, they're really kind of surprised. But then the more they think about it, they're like, you know what? That's a really good point. So I'd suggest that, certainly. Tips for recruiting your 5S team. So, I think making them feel special, letting them know that they were a chosen few, right? You're not going to put dozens of folks on this team. You're going to be careful who you pick. And the folks that you pick, they need to realize how important it is that they got picked in the first place, right? And you want to give them a purpose. Let them truly understand why it is that they were chosen for the team and what the team is going to be all about. Explain the benefits to them, of course. Make sure that they understand what 5S is all about. I mean, they should know that anyway, but at this point, really make it crystal clear to them as to why the company and the employees are going to be involved in 5S in the first place. Treat the project seriously, right? Make sure that they know that it's going to be well managed. Over the years, I've seen numerous 5S meetings, that I've been a part of or whatnot, and they just haven't been managed very well, and they're not they're not taken seriously enough. And 5S should be treated as seriously as any other initiative that you have in your company. Set clear expectations. That's really key, right? So that group lead or that 5S champion has to make sure that everybody on the team has clear expectations as to what it is that you're hoping that they're going to do for them to be implementing 5S throughout the company. And also, everybody's so busy, right, normally. And 5S is just one more thing that they're concerned with or that, they've signed up for. Let them know that you're going to spread the burden around the group, right? So the entire team should be doing certain parts of that. We'll talk about that in a minute. but let them know that it isn't going to be something that's going to bog them down for hours every single week. You want it to spread the wealth, if you will. So tips for 5S team success. It's funny. I think it's a great idea to have team members that happen to have an office, have them 5S their office. Now, to be clear, I do not mean tape out a stapler, mark off where your keyboard is on your desk, or mark off where your calculator might be, or what have you. I just think that's completely unnecessary. What I do mean, though, is as an example, I was at a client a couple months ago, really good guy and really eager to get 5S going at their plant. And, we spent some time in his office. And truth be told, the office was in quite disarray. Excuse me. And honestly, you need to lead by example, right? So, I mean, we've all heard that. And certainly in this case, you can't have an office that looked like that if you're going to lead a 5S group. So my suggestion to him was start with your office, right? Set clear expectations for the team. Really, really important for that. And I'd suggest creating a team charter. We actually have a free download on our website that you can grab. On the 5S Store website, under the 5S Made Easy tab, there's downloadable forms. And one of those is this 5S charter that I'm going to show. Very simple form, right? It's just got a nice way for you to methodically get everybody on board, make sure you agree to what the scope of the team is and the implementation and whatnot. And you can take this and edit and do what you want with it or create your own. But having a charter that everybody agrees to and gets on board with will really help kind of solidify the team. Divide up the 5S responsibilities. So I mentioned this on my last webinar, but I think it's worth repeating. And I had mentioned it earlier that you're going to spread the wealth around. And we use the acronym SOAR. So there's a lot of different parts of 5S that need to be shared. But to help you remember it, we created SOAR as an acronym. So the S is for supplies. Have one person on the team responsible for maintaining the 5S materials and solutions and supplies that you're going to need. The red tags, the tapes, all that good fun stuff, right? I would even suggest creating the Kanban for those supplies, but have one person responsible for the supplies and making sure that you never run out in the facility. O is for open communication. So the meaning there is have one person responsible for updating all the whiteboards, all the communication boards regarding 5S, keeping the meeting minutes of the team, perhaps sending out the weekly or monthly newsletters that you might have, updating the before and after pictures, that sort of thing. Have somebody responsible for that. What I found often is 5S group leads wind up having to do all this stuff themselves. And that's why a lot of times 5S isn't sustainable. If you spread it around, you'll be able to sustain it over time without a problem. And A is for audits, right? We all love 5S audits. I know I do. And have somebody on the team responsible for managing the audit process. Maybe that's something the champion should do, but it doesn't have to be, not by a long stretch. And I would spread it around too over time. And then have somebody responsible for red tag management. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean just simply making sure you have red tags. That means if you have a red tag process, somebody should be responsible for creating the procedure and holding the company and people responsible, hold them accountable to the procedure. Make sure that red tags are being filled out, that materials are being put in the red tag area, and that they're being dispositioned, right? Quite often when I'm on a facility floor, I'll see, if I see a red tag area at all, I'll see a pile of stuff that's been there forever. And you can tell because there's dust all over it. There might even be an old date on the red tag if they bothered putting that on there. And that's my point. Somebody should be responsible for the red tag process all the way through, okay? And make sure as a team, you capture lessons learned. So what's that mean? Every time you do an implementation or you hit up an area, you do a blitz in an area or whatnot, you're going to learn stuff every single time. Make sure somebody's capturing those lessons learned so that you can look them over for every other implementation and share it across the plant. Also, something I found really useful is to create a parking lot for out of scope ideas that pop up. you folks probably know, anytime you do any kind of continuous improvement get together or a blitz or an initiative, other things just creep up, right? And that happens a lot because you're just thinking about everything that's going on. Well, what's really important is to make sure that you don't let those things creep in and throw you off course. But you don't want to lose those ideas, right? So I like to have like a big, Post-it paper up on the wall. And anytime a parking lot idea comes up, something that's out of scope, jot it down, capture it, make a plan for addressing those later. Also, it's a great idea to turn the team over every once in a while. You can do it quarterly or every 6 months or whatnot, but you want new, fresh blood. You want to cycle through as many people you can throughout the facility on your 5S team. It gives fresh ideas and it gets everybody involved, which is really important, right? You don't want the same team for months and years on end. First of all, they get boring. Second of all, you're going to lose a lot of progress that way because you won't have new ideas coming in. You saw that. Tips for 5S communication. So I like to stay consistent, right? Keep your boards updated. Make sure that they have current data on them. Make sure that the whiteboards, your communication boards are clear and that they don't get all muddied up with information that's not pertinent to your 5S initiative. And make it personal. Who doesn't like to see their names up in lights, right? If you have the right type of 5S communication board there, you should have pictures of the team and what is it that people have been doing. Make sure you use a high quality board, not one that's going to ghost over time. We have really high quality boards here, and it took us years to find really good ones. And boy, these are just fantastic. They come clean, lickety split without a bat of an eye. But you've probably all seen those whiteboards in the past where they just look terrible after no time of writing on them and maybe erasing them and whatnot. So make sure you use a really high quality board. Standardize the document holders. This is a nice way to tighten up your whiteboards. So use like color-coded document holders. Maybe a color code, the audit with maybe a red color coded document holder or a green if you want. Use various colors like that to separate out, maybe the pictures are using a blue document holder or whatnot. It doesn't matter. You can make it your own. But if you use nice, clear, concise, high quality document holders, the board would just look better, be more professional looking, right? Don't feel a little clutter, like I said, before and after pictures. A tip that I give everybody I see is when you take your before and after pictures, make sure you think about where you're standing for the before picture so that you could take an identical picture for the after picture in the exact same spot. It just looks so much cooler if you're able to see an exact improvement. As opposed to, oh, you did some loosey-goosey angle that doesn't really look all that great for the before picture. And then you go back, you don't want to take it from the same spot because it just doesn't look that good. Try and put some thought into your before and after pictures. It'll just resonate so much nicer. And make sure to have somebody responsible for maintaining the boards, like I mentioned earlier in the O part of the SOAR acronym. Signs of a healthy team. And this goes without saying for any team really, but if you have a healthy 5S team, people are showing up on time for meetings, right? They arrive ready to go, right? They're already prepared. And if they have questions or issues or whatever, or if they're supposed to come with questions or new input, they're already prepared with that stuff. As opposed to just flying by the seat of their pants because they happen to show up at the meeting. Come prepared to the meeting. People should should complete their action items on time. During those meetings, it's important to make sure that people get action items. But the big thing with action items too is to make sure there's a due date. Obviously somebody responsible for it, but it's really important to make sure that they're actually on time. And if your team is getting a little stale and whatnot, that might be because people aren't really all that eager and they're not raising their hand often to do more. If you need to nudge people a little bit to say, hey, do you want to pick this up? Or how about you take this over? That's cool. But hopefully you have people that are already there that are really eager to just keep doing. So that's another sign of a good team, is that people are raising their hands to just keep doing more. And there should be good constructive pushback and discussion. right? They don't have to be disagreements or whatnot, but what I've seen at times is where there's a team where one person is running the show, and nobody says anything, right? What's the use of that? You might as well go back to your computer and not even bother. So you want to make sure that there's good, solid discussion there. The whole time, the whole interest is in improvement, right? And you should always be progressing. Things should always be getting better. It is continuous improvement after all. Okay, with that, we're going to open it up for questions.
Awesome. So we actually have a question from YouTube asking you, David, what's the best way to communicate expectations to the group besides in meetings?
The best way to give expectations to the group?
Yes.
I think so I guess that would go for the 5S champion, right? Whoever's running the initiative. They should just make it crystal clear, and it should be in that charter document as to what it is you expect from everybody. So, for example, if one person is going to be responsible for maintaining the audits, the group lead should make it clear to that person that's maintaining the audits that, look, I expect you to report on the status of audits every Friday at 3:00 or something like that. So it's really important that the expectations are clear, and that goes without saying for any employee. Nobody wants to ever feel like they don't know what's expected of them, because that's how things stall and they fail. So it's really important to make sure that the expectations are clear. And if there's any ambiguity or folks don't understand what's expected of them, you need to make sure that you have that type of culture whereby they can push back and say, I'm not really sure what it is you expect of me. So that's what I would say for that.
That makes great sense, David, and is so important. Lucas is asking, how do you suggest finding time to focus on 5S that is outside the daily vortex?
Well, that's the great question. I get hit on that quite a bit. And interesting, you should ask me that, Lucas. I'm actually in the midst of reading a book called Tiny Habits. And the reason I'm reading that is because I get this question a lot. Like, people are constantly saying to me, I just can't get to 5S. So the concept here that I'm really picking up on and looking to implement with a lot of my clients is you just have to do just a little bit. You don't have to feel like you got to tackle the world. So even if it's only 10 minutes a week, you just have a little bit of momentum, and that's all you need. Like what I find is a lot of folks think of 5S as this big monstrosity of a project. And I think that's where we get into trouble. Like, we don't realize that, or we don't think about the fact that if we're just making a little bit of progress every week and you get that momentum going, you'll continue to improve. I think what folks do is they give themselves way too short of a timeline. So they're like, all right, well, within the next month, I'm going to get, this entire facility 5S, if you will. And that's just unrealistic. So I think people they set themselves up to fail because they load way too much on their plate. So just figure out one small thing that you could do each week. Maybe you'll go around and use some management walk cards, which are little Post-its or whatnot. Get out of your office for 10 minutes a week, walk around and check out, how's this area doing, and leave some notes behind. And that's it. Just give yourself 10 minutes or whatnot. And over time, if you just do a little bit every week, you'll be fine. You'll get the momentum going. Excuse me.
I think that's great advice, David. It's probably great life advice as well.
Yep.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay.
So this question asks, is it your experience that companies that use a team to do their 5S are better at implementing than others? And do you have an example you can share?
Let's see. Yeah, actually, I don't want to name the company, but absolutely. Having a 5S team puts some control around it and some standards around it. And when you have a team, you'll actually get that focus for 5S. You'll make sure, that team is going to make sure that they're always moving forward, right? People are being held accountable for continually working on 5S. So you'll have that momentum I just talked about. You'll always be moving forward, even if it's a little bit, as opposed to it's just a free for all and people get to 5S when they could get to it. I think most of us know that that's not really going to work for you, right? So I do think a team is really important. So let's see. There's a client actually here in Massachusetts that does great work with Lean, and they have a 5S team, and they didn't always have that team, and they found that they weren't getting their stuff done, right? So what they did was they built this team similar to the layout that we have here, and they started making much more improvements. And it's really been very successful with them. I mean, do they fall back every once in a while and things come up, right? We all know that happens. Sure, but they get right back on track. And I think without a team, it's just not going to happen. Things are going to come up, and before you know it, there's no 5S going on at all.
Absolutely. That's a great point, David. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. It's 12:30 on the nose. So David, if you want to pop us over to that next slide, we just want to give you some ways you can reach out to David. As we mentioned at the top of the webinar, his book, 5S Made Easy, is available at the5sstore.com. The free online best practices where we have loads of tips and advice and case studies and images of befores and afters over at the 5S Blackboard. You can find that at learn.the5sstore.com. You can reach out to David via email or via phone. And as always, you can find us at the5sstore.com on all the social webs or on the website. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today in these very interesting times. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to email or give David a call. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Bye-bye, everyone.